And he said, if you say it's going to be hard for you, it's going to be hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell my kids, when they've had stretch moments, and they say, I don't know how to make friends, or this is going to be difficult. And I would say to them, like, if you say it's going to be difficult, it's going to be difficult. So,
hey, y'all, what's up? Welcome to I guess we'll call this the inaugural episode of Dads in the Class. This is a official LinkedIn Live experience. I'm calling it an experience because it is much more than a podcast. Of course, I am Dion, the Glad Dad, and this is an extension of another podcast that I do called Black People Parenting, where we talk about just ways and spaces for Black folks to have conversations about raising Black children. I wanted to extend that. I got this idea a couple of weeks ago to do a podcast specifically geared towards fathers and specifically about fatherhood and what we do in terms of our kids' education. But because I think it's important that we as fathers are always engaged and involved in our kids' education. And I wanted to create a space for conversations to happen about our kids and their education and how we're teaching them and what they're being taught and the role that fathers play, especially in a time where, so much history is being erased in the classroom, and we're getting so many different just challenges and obstacles as parents that we have to face when it comes to making sure that our children get the proper education. So I just wanted to create this space and create this opportunity for us to come together and have conversations about fatherhood and about how we can be involved in our kids' education. So for this first episode, I have a real good brother, a real good friend of mine, someone who I've shared war stories with. We both have daughters who are in college now, who are at the same college. And I just wanted to have him on and talk to him. He's also an entrepreneur. He's also someone who has ran his own business and owned his own business for several years. So we'll talk about what role that has played in his involvement in his daughter's education and just a lot of different things. So this is going to be something different. It's going to be something totally new. So feel free to leave comments. Feel free to let us know your thoughts. Feel free to chime in on the conversation. But right now, let's introduce the first guest on Dads in the Class podcast, my main man, Patrick Patterson. What's up, good brother?
What's up, man? Put your ones up, guys. I'm number one. I'm finally, let's take a moment. I'm finally number one, man. I'm 49, and I'm finally number one, brother. I'm glad to be with you, man.
Numero uno, man. So thank you for being here, man. So father, husband, father of two girls. One is in college. Also, just a great influence on my life, man. So I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have this conversation. So let's start off. I want you to share with us the story behind Global Partners for Fathers and Families, and what was like the defining moment that led you to creating that company.
Yeah, it's a great story for me. And I want you to notice the mic that's stationed here. It's not plugged up, but I'm trying to make sure I'm giving you the vibe. So
people didn't know that, though.
They didn't know that. I was, for many years, I'm a social worker, undergrad from Benedict College in South Carolina, and graduate degrees, master's in social work, master's in public health from USC in South Carolina. And for years, I had worked federal government, foundations, corporately, and I'll never forget, probably in 2015, I was working for a corporation and I was invited to go to Malaysia to speak at a conference. And I'll never forget this, this before my business. And these folks found me. I had been doing some stuff internationally, and a group in Malaysia wanted me to come and speak at their conference. So I went to my boss, my supervisor, my director, and said, hey, I got this free opportunity, free as in travel is covered, to speak at this conference. And she said to me, you can't go. I said, I'm sorry. I said, it's covered. They want me as a presenter or trainer. I really would love to be at this conference. And she said, well, I've never been to Malaysia, as in herself. And she said, so basically you ain't going before I go. So I left that night very hurt because for the first time in my life, I had an opportunity in front of me and somebody blocked it. And so I called a couple of mentors. One lady named Diane Dawson. She's retired now, but she's like a mother figure to me. And she said, take this pain and create your business.
Mm.
I mean, I was in tears. I really I wanted a hug from my mom. I don't know what I want. I just felt like, wow. And I'm motivated by stuff like that. So I literally got into the lab, started drafting out my plan. My passion, my purpose has been working with fathers. And along the way, I've learned how to write grants and train people how to do that. So I put those two together and I named it. I was going to name it National, but a colleague of mine said, man, I want you to think bigger. I want you to name it Global. And I thought, but every now and then, Dion, you have people who see what you can't see. And it's taken me now to 10 countries doing the work and 48 different states. So I'm grateful, but the purpose of it was really to take what God has given me, which is a passion for fathers, men, and boys, and then allowing other organizations to get funding along the way. So that's been the birth. We're going now on a little more than a decade and haven't looked back since. So I'm actually glad. And I've seen this lady several times in my travels, and I just tell her all the time, thank you. Thank you.
Hater.
So, yeah.
Thank you, hater.
I usually sneeze that part,
right.
but
thank you, hater. Right.
But every now and then, man, you need that wall to push you
right
away. And that was a wall that I kicked off of, and it's been happy trail since.
Right. That's good. Now we both cherish our role as fathers, right? Again, we talk all the time. How do you believe, even with the work that you do and being, having to travel and having to move around, how do you believe you're still being able to be active and have an active presence in your daughter's lives has influenced their paths in education?
I'll give you two real recent examples. One, you mentioned earlier, entrepreneur, but I've written 2 children's books with my daughters. And I can speak about my daughter, who's at the same school as your daughter. In all of her applications, a distinguishing factor was when she wrote that she had written 2 published children's books. We didn't write it with that in mind, but that was huge. Secondly, I think my wife is also an entrepreneur. Both of our daughters have started businesses. My oldest, who's at the same college, she is a nail tech, and she's gotten classmates, colleagues, from different schools, but also we've had adults who've come to her. So I think her idea and her vision around what is possible, both of them, is partly because of my work. And then the last thing I'll say around what I've really treasured is with my own business, I've been able to kind of regain or reclaim some of my time, so I haven't missed many things related to school. So that's been huge for us.
Like Maxine Waters.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about sending our daughters off to college. Now, you and I have had discussion after discussion and kind of talked about what it would look like, what it was going to be like, what the experience was going to feel like. And I know it was a momentous occasion for you. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the emotion that you had sending her to college and how you equipped her for this new adventure.
Yeah, well, I'm on week end, so let's not get carried away. But
you just stopped crying yesterday, like me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this might be hear my tears, but going into her senior year, you and I have been talking because your daughter's a year ahead of my daughter, and I was thinking, this is going to be a long year, but it was not. It was a very, very quick year. I remember in the fall, this time last year, when she came home from school for a full month, I disciplined myself and her to do applications every day. She hated it, but she got accepted earlier than most of her friends. And so in January, she was in a good space. But sending her off was a rocky, it's like up and down emotions. It was like excited for the graduation, excited for the acceptance letters. And then as the weeks came closer to her going to move in, it was just interesting because you can hear the silence in our house with like the change that's about to happen. We took her last week in preparation. The packing was, it was a a pull back and forth because it was like, you can't take all this stuff, but there were things she wanted. But getting to campus, and I was the first in my family, but our experiences were very different. My folks dropped me off and they peeled or they left.
Mm-hmm.
For
You're on your own,
us,
Jack.
you're on your own, Jack. Here's $20.
Right.
Beat up that vending machine and have a good time.
That's got to last you for the next 3 months.
3 months. You know what I mean? There was no cell phones or nothing like that. So I remembered just how that feels, and I've tried to put myself in her position. But we dropped her off. One of the things I'm very proud of, and I did this almost 4 years ago. She was a freshman in high school. I wrote her a letter, and the letter was to be read the day that she was dropped off for college. And emotionally, I was pretty good leading up to going to the campus and everything. But the night before we dropped her off, we were staying in the area, and I opened the letter and I read the letter. And it wasn't until I got to, and it was basically a recall of monumental events, riding a bike, tying shoes, things like that. But at the very end, I wrote a sentence that says, as much as I want to hold you, it's time to let you go. And that was written 4 years ago. And I mean, by this time it's 4 of us in the room, and it's snot bubbles everywhere. I mean, we're just crying. But what I wanted to have happen, which was to be able to leave her with something that she, can. And I didn't save a copy of it. I have a copy for myself and a copy for her. And one of the things that she did with it was, and all the moving in and out, she kept it on her the entire time. The embrace at the end of that conversation was nothing like a father and a daughter. I mean, it's just, it was special. But the next couple of days mixed in with moving and things like that, I even saw, and we're pretty close, I even saw a deeper connection. And we have a younger daughter who was in the room as well. And I think I told her this week, she said, Dad, I write grants. She said, Dad, if that was a grant, you would have won the grant. That's how good the letter was.
That's $5 million, champ. That's $5 million.
But it's been interesting, man, because this week she's called us, she's FaceTimed us, but for us, we miss her. We've gone out a couple nights this week, and I'm used to saying table for 4. And I've been finding myself saying table for 3. You know what I mean?
Wow. It's
huge, man. I don't think anybody can prepare you for it. But I appreciate you. I appreciate Kelly Little. I appreciate Antoine Medley. There's a couple brothers who are in the same position as me who just kind of said, you're going to be good, bro.
Yeah. It's a different type of parenting that you have to do now.
Yeah.
Right. It's a different type of parenting. You have to let go of one phase, and then you start to embrace the next phase.
Yeah.
Right. So now for you got one out the door, right? But you're also still juggling the needs of that college student and also the needs of a high schooler. And that's nothing that's easy. It's not an easy feat. How do you ensure that you're present for both of them academically, right? Because there's 2 different spaces. You're navigating now a young adult and someone who is, your other daughter's a junior, right? You're navigating now, trying to guide her into and get into this space where your oldest daughter is, while your oldest daughter is now moving into the next phase of life. So how are you making sure that you're present for both of them academically?
This might sound like a detour from your question, but taking care of myself. In most roles that you and I play, and any father who's watching, we might not verbalize it, but we carry a lot, as we walk through the house or the halls or whatever in the streets. But I have decided at the end of last year, the school year, my youngest, I felt like needed something different from me than Peyton, my oldest. So for me, I've been very conscious with using the word no. Over the years, my wife is an angel. She's allowed me to fulfill my dream and still be present, but I want to self-regulate. So working out, I've always done, but I've definitely intensified the time I spend with myself. Meditation, I've done, but also something I've never really done. You know, my learning around dads being at school is to go in and fix the problem. You know, this year, going into my youngest's junior year, she has a principal for her grade, and I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I need your help. I know this is going to be different for my youngest, and I want to be a partner with you these next 2 years to make sure that she gets what she needs." So I have been intentional in making sure I'm available. There's some things I wanted to do professionally the last several years that I have said I will get to them in a couple of years. I've said no to things. So managing my time, but also just really dedicating space for her, but also, and this is new to me, and you've been helping me a lot. Every conversation with our oldest is not a correction conversation. You know, when she calls and like she had a Mountain Dew, which she's never had in this house, you know, it's like, okay, it wasn't even time. You know what I mean? She had the freedom pill, you know?
Right,
So,
right.
but taking care of myself, taking
Right.
care of myself. If I can continue doing that, because I'm no good to them if I'm no good to myself. So I need to make sure I'm managing that and just being available to them.
Now, I've heard you talk about your father, and when I hear you talk about your father, I always think about, in my mind, I always see an image of Kevin Hart talking about his dad, walking into class, and he's like, all right. And he's just, you know, every time I hear you talk about your dad, I think about Kevin Hart's dad. And that is the epitome of what like fatherhood and education was growing up in the 70s and in the 80s, which is totally different from what we do now and how involved we are now. How did you learn to be this engaged in your daughter's education? Because you didn't have that same blueprint that you're following now for yourself, right? Like you said, back in the day, the dad came to fix a problem. He was there to be the disciplinarian. He was there to correct. How did you get the tools that you have now to go in and start being involved and engaged in your kids' education?
Yeah, I think part of it was my wife. I didn't get the book when they were born. You probably got the book because I know you're from Virginia. You probably got the book.
They didn't have the books in the 757.
Oh, they did?
No, sir. Not in Norfolk. They didn't have the books in Norfolk. No, they didn't.
It's been a learn as you go type deal. I'm fortunate that my wife has been next to me throughout the process, but she did have that kind of father. You know, she did have the academic supports. You know, I was an athlete, so I wasn't disrespectful, so I didn't have that many issues. But for me, my questions have always been, and it's a different feel when I walk in a building, just be honest. I've had my kids' teachers say, you know, your dad is mean. And I'm like, I didn't even say nothing. So managing that, so I've had to temper, you know, my approach, but also not my expectations. But for me, it's just really listening to my kids. My kids they're proud of me. They're very proud of me. And so when I hear them talk to their teachers about me, they talk about everything that you and I talk about. My dad's here. My dad's presenting here. He got this award. He won this grant. They tell all of this business at the school. So for me, it's just really showing up as best I can with my presence. I haven't really had to do what my dad did when I was a kid, you know, because they're pretty well behaved. But this next 2 years will be honestly new for me. I've not really had to do anything where I felt like something is missing, and it's me. I need to be there. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah. Was there a time? I'll tell a story before I'll preface this with a story before I ask the question. For me, you know, I didn't know that what I was doing was making a difference until one moment. And for those who don't know my story, like I moved from Virginia to North Carolina to be closer to my daughter. I was adamant about taking her to school on the first day of school, starting from kindergarten every year up until middle school, when it wasn't cool for me to take her to school anymore on the first day. But I didn't know that I was making a difference. And I forget what grade she was in. But I was at a parent teachers conference, and the teacher was telling me that she was trying to teach my daughter double digit multiplication, and my daughter already knew double digit multiplication, right? Because for me, I would make it a practice to prepare my daughter for the grade before, during the summer. So the next grade that she was going up to, I would prepare her for a grade up in the summer. So the teacher asked my daughter, she said, well, how do you know how to do double digit multiplication? And my daughter said, my dad taught me. Right. And the teacher told me that in the parent teachers conference. And I said, oh, like it is making a difference. Like I am doing something, right? Because as fathers, it doesn't always feel like we are making a difference. So I'll ask you, was there a moment in your father engagement journey where you felt like you were making a difference that stood out to you, that made you feel like, yes, I'm making a difference in my kids' education specifically?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back too, because like I've always been at the school. I've always dropped them off. I've always gone to all these functions, but like actively inserting myself, I've done what everybody was expecting. I've never done the extra. I remember this story, and one of my biggest things is that my kids are safe. And I'll never forget my youngest, who's now 15. She was at a charter school in Delaware, and I'll never forget this. When they were little, I've always said to them, if anything happens to you, tell me and your mom, we will take care of the adults. Don't worry about anything. You stay a kid. And I'll never forget, she was probably in the 3rd grade, and I picked them up every day, and I would get them in the car and we'd talk about the day. And she's she's like me, she doesn't mind crying, but she's typically happy. And I'll never forget getting in the car, showtime. She says, I said, how was your day? I turned around, she started crying. I said, we driving away from the school. I said, what happened? She was just crying. I said, what happened? She said, another kid and her got into an argument. The parent picked the kid up, and the parent said to my daughter, she said, you're a bad child. So I don't know if you know Dukes of Hazzard, but I slung that truck around.
I know Fast and Furious.
Oh yeah.
Vin Diesel. I know Vin Diesel. There's a lot of fighting going on there.
Yeah,
I know that.
So I turned the truck around again. For all of my children's lives, when I've gone into the school system, most people anticipate, they have a stereotype about us, as a dad, regardless of race, I believe. So I walked in, the parent was still there. And I walk in, my youngest, and she's crying. I said to the lady, I said, if you don't mind, call your husband. I want to be respectful. I said, call your husband. She said,
respectfully,
no.
Right.
Yeah, respectfully. She said, no. I said, well, let me just say this to you. I said, if you have an issue with my daughter, bring it to me and my wife. I said, we're here every day. And so end of the conversation was, I said, I don't know what happened, but don't do that again, because it upset my daughter. And I left, took them to get ice cream. I praised her for telling me what happened. And going back to when I first said this to them when they were very little, if you ever have an issue, tell me and your mom. And she remembered that I said to her, we would take care of the adults. We never had an issue since. So when I think about one of our roles as dads is to make sure they feel supported. I felt hugely proud that I delivered on a promise that I told her I would deliver on. And that's been huge. Academically speaking, this is my wife's kids. I mean, our kids are smart. What I have to do is just reinforce, go ahead and read that book before you go to bed. Let's do these applications. Peyton getting into school this past fall, or this fall, I'm proud to say I disciplined ourselves for that month to do that. So it wasn't anything that's fanfare, related, but I was there for that. I was there for that.
And I think you speak to an important point, that it's important to advocate for your kids. Oftentimes as parents, we are either afraid, or we don't have the knowledge, or we don't have, I don't know what it is, but sometimes we don't advocate enough for our kids, right? And I think it's important that we as fathers know that it's okay to go to a school and speak up for your kids, whether it be to another parent, whether it be to a teacher, whether it be to an administrator. You have to be your child's biggest advocate.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes as fathers, we don't, we don't get that. Sometimes we just kind of let stuff go by. Okay, if that's what the teacher say, that's what the teacher say. If that's what, if that's what the other adult said, no, you have to go. And especially for me as someone who has, my youngest son, my son is on the spectrum. So, we have to go through IEPs and making sure that he gets everything that he needs, all of the services that he needs, and all of those things. So advocating for your kids is extremely important. Now, also feel free to drop comments in the chat. Also feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, this is an exclusive live event that I'm only doing for the Black People Parenting Facebook group and for my LinkedIn community, Patrick's LinkedIn community. So please feel free to share this and give us some comment and show us some love. Shout out to the folks who have commented so far. Definitely appreciate that love. So let's kind of pivot just a little bit. We talked about entrepreneurship, and we talked about marriage and family and having all of those things on your plate. How do you and your wife navigate just the shared responsibilities of the education? Like you said, when it comes to education, I know that those are her kids, but what role does she play and what role do you play in the process?
I think we do a good job of demonstrating for our kids. Both of us finished college. We have always said to them that this is what we expect of them. We have demonstrated relationship management. It's not very uncommon for us to be someplace and people know our kids through a Facebook post. And so they find out somewhat by proxy that we talk about them all the time. So I think making them aware that we're proud of them. But for us, it's been just kind of staying on the path. One of the things that we did together, a very good friend of mine who was a superintendent of education in South Carolina some years ago, as we were going to middle school, he said, make sure your kids are in the AP classes. And I was like, I was below average student. And he said, no matter what, your kids will rise to the level of expectation that you have for them. And we put them both in accelerated classes from 6th grade on. And that was something that we did together. Our kids knew it. The schools knew it. And it was, for me, it was new for me. That wasn't my background. That wasn't the way we did things. But we have demonstrated, we've communicated, and then we've reinforced the importance of finishing what you start. Very important. So Sharani's amazing. She's amazing.
She is. I love me some Sharani. I think she is the perfect match to be sure that you do everything that you need to do, because she is, she is the brains of the operation. She is the looks of the operation. She is the one that makes sure that Global Partners for Fathers and Family flourishes to the level, because if not for her, good brother, let me tell you,
the Wi-Fi will be off. It'd be unstable Wi-Fi right now.
Right. I don't know where you would be right now. So let's talk for a second to the dads who are just kind of embarking on this journey of education and being involved in their kids' education. What words of wisdom would you impart to them?
Yeah, I could think of 3 things that we have done, I think done well. If my kids like it, I learn to love it. Like my oldest, she became fascinated with nails and she wanted to start her own business. We became her first clients, and as a dad, I would sit and get my nails done before she even started taking clients. And I remember the conversation 2 years ago. She said, I want to start my business, but I don't want to make any mistakes. That was like a alley-oop. A life lesson alley-oop. So we have totally supported and endorsed her in that regard. My youngest is a cook, chef, baker, and in the same regard, since she was young, the kitchen was her homework. I mean, that was her homeroom. She enjoyed the kitchen. So
Mhm.
her last year of school, she created a business and it flourished. So I would say if your kids like it, learn to love it. It may change, but what they really want is to know that you are interested in supporting that thing. The second thing I would say is keep them active. I mean, activities, whether it be social, it could be church, it could be athletics. I have learned to appreciate structure, and I know that kids need structure. So if they have the summers off where they get to sleep until 3 p.m., I'm not judging nobody, but you're missing an opportunity to get them involved. So we got them jobs, but they got their jobs, but they started working early. Um, and it was great for them to understand that all the stuff we've been saying about how you manage people, they saw the angry client. They saw the frustrated they saw the happy person. They saw the person that tipped them when they did good. So keep them active. And then the last thing I'll say, and it's probably number one, is praying over them and praying with them.
Mhm.
That's going to serve them better once they leave our house more than anything else. So those three things I would say to a new dad are paramount.
I like it. Now, as a father, we know that every journey has hurdles.
Mhm.
It's never easy. What challenges have you encountered, especially being someone who is, as busy and life be life, and man, especially when
Yeah.
you get to the age where you really gotta, really maneuver and things start happening in life. What are some of the challenges that you faced in staying connected to your daughter's education? And how did you navigate them? Because as a father, we know it could be hard to get to the parent teachers conferences. It can
Yeah.
be hard to join the PTAs. It can be hard to keep up. I think it's easier now with apps and social media and things like
Yeah.
that. But what are some of the challenges that you face, and how did you kind of overcome them?
I think for most dads who are, whether in the house or not, we still want to provide for our kids.
Mhm.
And at the height of starting my business, I mean, there was a huge positive response to me doing things that I love, fatherhood and grant trainings. And so I was getting requests, you know, places I just never thought I'd be doing business actually. And so early in my professional career, my own business, I just thought I couldn't say no to those things. I cannot not go to South Dakota. I can't go to I got to go to New Orleans. I got to do this with the NFL or whatever it was. And I like to self-correct. I'd always like to do that if my wife has to do that. And so managing my time was huge. I enjoy dropping my kids off at school,
Mm.
and I had to prioritize that. The other thing I think that I'm very transparent about was I believe I was burnt out. I believe I had anxiety. I believe I was probably depressed for a period of their development because I was taking on more than I could carry. And it looked normal because I smile a lot, but there were nights when it got dark and everybody was asleep. I'm thinking to myself, bruh, why is my heart beating so